Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. So what's the big deal? Don't governors come here all the time? I've never seen a governor before. Well, I learned long ago in politics never to stand between an audience and the bar, the buffet, or the bathroom. So I apologize in advance for being a little late and also for keeping you from lunch. And I'll be concise. You know, I'm very honored and grateful to stand before you as governor of Minnesota. I'm very grateful for the support of many of you that made it possible for me to be here today. You'll probably find already, and you'll find in the future, I'm probably not going to be everything that you would wish for me to be. I'm reminded of the Boston politician who, before the election, said, to his constituents, don't compare me against the Almighty, compare me against the alternative. And at least in the governor of Wisconsin, I finally found an alternative who can make even me look good by comparison. I've been, people ask me, am I surprised about the job? And, I worked for Governor Perpich as a commissioner twice, and absolutely, a good DFL governor. And, this is the Sturgis State Auditor. This is my 10th legislative session, the 4th in which I've served in the executive branch in the first year of a new term. So I thought I had some sense of what to expect, but I've never seen an onslaught and I've never seen an assault against good Minnesotans as I've seen in this legislative process so far. People talk about wanting to go into the future, and sometimes when I would point out what I inherited over from the last 8 years, they'd say, well, you're talking about the past. I mean, the past they want to take us into is the past of Adam Smith back in the 18th century, where you just have no taxes and you have no government, and it's just a free-for-all, and it's economic Darwinism. And some people did, very, very well during that period of time, amassed giant fortunes, and most people didn't do so well, most Americans. Then we went through the era, the 1920s and Coolidge and Harding, and then Hoover, and the business of America is business. Same thing, whatever the rich and powerful want, the rich and powerful have to have, because if they don't get everything they want, then then they'll take jobs somewhere else. They won't give jobs to the people who need them. Somehow the rest of America will suffer. And then we had the Great Depression, so we learned that didn't work so well for people either. And we learned that there is a role for government in protecting. I believe it was James Madison, one of the founders of the country, writers of the Constitution, said, if men were angels, government would not be necessary. Well, we know women are close to angelic, but we men, we're still a lot of defects, work in process. So we need government. We need government. We need government to stand up for those who would otherwise be trampled afoot. And so I see this as a contest between those of us who want to move forward and want to innovate, and that's President Dewar's word, an excellent word, innovate. Reform assumes something, everything's bad or a lot is bad, and so you have to, fix it. I like the word innovate from President Dewar because it says that there's a lot that's good about education. There's a lot of good about public service. There's a lot of good about state government. There's a lot of good in the private sector. There's a lot of good about Minnesota. And so our collective challenge and opportunity is to innovate and make it better. And I know that's your commitment, and that's my commitment. But it's not about this kind of assault on the basic rights of working men and women. It's not about taking the right of collective bargaining away. It will not happen as I'm governor of Minnesota. The basic right of collective bargaining will not be taken away if I'm governor of Minnesota. Thank you. And one of the basic rights, in fact, the fundamental right of collective bargaining, is the right to negotiate over wages and benefits and worker protections and safety, pensions. And those rights will not be taken away, not if I'm governor of Minnesota. Not as long as I'm governor of Minnesota, they will not be taken away. Talk about freezing salaries or forcing cuts in salaries by the legislature. As draconian as it was, Governor Walker's proposal in Wisconsin set aside, did not affect the right to bargain collectively over wages and benefits. Even he didn't go that far, was not that drastic, was not that extreme. It pretends that many of you have not already accepted wage freezes, or virtually so, over the last few years. It assumes that there's somehow no recognition on your part, or those of AFSCME employees, or Teamsters employees, or others in the public sector, as there has been in the private sector, that we're in difficult economic times. Is there anybody here who doesn't know that we're in difficult economic times? And so those of you that have already accepted that reality and stepped forward because you care about class size, because you care about the quality of education, because you care about supplies and the other basic needs of your students, you care a lot more than anybody else in Minnesota because you're teachers, right? Right. And your parents, right? A lot of your parents. And who cares more about children than parents and teachers? You care, and I care. So to put an arbitrary freeze in the legislature, by the legislature, just says those of you who have already made a commitment are going to be punished. They're going to be penalized. And how are we going to have any kind of reasonable collective bargaining process over wages in the future if people have to be afraid every year that next year they're going to be penalized for stepping up and doing what's necessary? They call it fringe benefits. Anybody think health care is a fringe benefit? Yeah. Pensions. We've got a sound pension system in Minnesota right now. I've met with the 3 executive directors. You and others anteed up last year. It was tough to do. And we have 3 pension plans that are sound on an actuarial basis. And our members are, your members and our public employees are already doing what the draconian is called by many, the laws that were passed in Wisconsin would require those public employees to do. Bring them up to, actually not even quite up to, but close to what Minnesotans are already doing. They talk about, boy, it's terrible. Public pension plans are too generous, you know? Para worker average gets about $15,000 a year in pension, worked all their life. State employees, about $19,000. Teachers, more than that because your salary base is higher. And then there are those who are sitting there who jump into commissioners' positions over the last 8 years, you get high fives that are more than you and others will make who spent your whole life in teaching or in state government or in local government. And no one talks about that. The facts are that of the value of our public pensions, 12% came from you, 13% from the employers, so you matched them half and half, and 85% came from the appreciated value of the pension funds by making investments. That's supposed to happen. Even the people who, you know, preach the gospel of defined contribution plans. I mean, employees in the private sector put their money in, and lo and behold, if they're fortunate, it's what we want, means the economy's growing, the value appreciates. And and no one questions whether they're entitled to the entire value, appreciated value of their fund. So why would it be different for public employees? And to those that say, well, you know, private sector employees don't have defined benefit plans anymore, well, shame on those who took it away from them. But in fact, they do. They have something called Social Security. And I was in the U.S. Senate back in 2005, 2006, when some of the same people who want to destroy public pensions in Minnesota and elsewhere in this country wanted to privatize Social Security. And you know, if that had happened, we would be in a financial crisis in that system today, the likes of what we couldn't even imagine. It'd be worth half the value, 2/3 the value. People retired today on Social Security don't have a lot, but they have something they can depend upon. When you retire, you don't get a lot, but you have something you can depend upon. And as long as I'm governor of Minnesota, when you retire, you'll have something you can depend upon. That's a promise. That's a promise. Now I know, I've told you this before, but it bears repeating. I know the challenges you face in the classroom because my first job out of college, I taught 2 years at a public school in New York City. And I've always said it was the toughest job I ever had. Starting to reconsider that over the last couple of months, but it's right up there. And the challenges you face today in schools around the state, and I've been in schools all over the state, which is something that would be a good idea for those who want to destroy them to do before they, at least spend a few days in them and check them out. The challenges you face in Minnesota schools today are greater than what I experienced Gulp over 40 years ago now in New York City. I had 4 different languages spoken in my classrooms. You have 30, 50, 70, I think there are 100 in all the schools in Minnesota today. Rochester Mayo High School a few years ago was probably more than that now. I remember the principal telling me that in a school of 1,800 students there were 54 different languages and dialects. Elementary school in Egan, 27. And these are, fairly well-off parts of our state, but that's the diversity. If you look at the census report, that's the diversity. I thought I learned how to teach the first year out of trial by fire, and I came the second year, and I had one called ESL, now ELL classroom, and I was back to square one with 4 different languages. So the challenges you face, back then it was before the passage, and thank goodness there is, of the Americans with Disabilities Act. But the challenges you face in classrooms with so many children with special needs, and those of you who are special ed teachers who are destined immediately for sainthood in the hereafter, I guarantee it. Thank you. Thank you for your work. And the rising class sizes. I had 32 kids in the 9th grade classroom, so I know, I don't care how good a teacher you are, you cannot reach individually 32 kids in a 40-minute time period in a 9th grade classroom. You can't do it. So I know from my personal experience the challenges and the difficulties you face. And you don't ask for great rewards, you don't ask for great recognition, you don't get it. You ask for the rewards of seeing that child improve in the classroom. You ask for the satisfaction of seeing a student struggle with a problem and then, with your help, a week later get it. And they got it, so they're going to get it for the rest of their lives. I've been in schools in Minnesota where they have the resources, where they do the kind of testing we should have, second, third, 4th grade, 1-minute reading out loud diagnostic tests or its equivalent. And those kids that stay with the school and with a special program all year long, they're reading at or above grade level by the end of the school year, 80 to 85% of them. That is life transforming. That means they're going to be able to read for the rest of their lives. That means they'll be able to succeed for the rest of their lives. And yes, that is a goal we should have. But why don't we have that? Because we don't have the resources, the funds, and they haven't been provided over the last decade to do that. And those who are responsible for that now have no responsibility for it whatsoever. It's all your fault. You're the ones to blame for the achievement gap. You're the ones to blame for class sizes being too high. You're the ones to blame if schools don't make acceptable progress. The responsibility starts at the top. If we're not making acceptable progress, that's my fault. That's the governor of Minnesota's responsibility. That's the legislature's responsibility. Thank you. Thank you. And taking responsibility doesn't mean blaming you. It doesn't mean blaming those of you and others who dedicated your lives and your careers to providing the best possible public education with the resources and the ever more limited resources available. You know, the facts are, and the former senator from New York, I had a chance to meet him once. He was leaving, and as I came into the Senate, Daniel Patrick Moynihan said, "You're entitled to your own opinions. You're not entitled to your own facts." And so the facts are that the state's per pupil aid formula has been cut by over 14% in real after-inflation dollars over the last 8 years. That's the fact. You know, that's why one of the main reasons property taxes have gone up. There are people in St. Paul who are in denial about property tax being a tax. Anybody pay a property tax with a different checkbook than you pay your income taxes? Or out of a different pocket of your different wallet? You know, there are people in denial about the fact that they have cut funding for public education at the state level by over 14% over the last 8 years. And that's why class sizes are too large. That's why 10 school districts have gone to a 4-day school week. Not according to anybody I know from education reasons, because of lack of money. 3 of the kids from a school district out in west central Minnesota who are on a 4-day school week brought my little puppy Mingo a couple weekends ago. We had coffee and cake together before they left, and so I said, well, you know, this is a high school junior, a sophomore, and a 5th grader. So what do you do? No, I'm sorry, yeah, it's junior, 9th grader, 5th grader. Got to get my facts right here. I said, what do you do on Monday when there's no school and your parents are working? Sleep, sleep, and nothing. Wow, there's educational progress for us. That's certainly going to prepare them to compete against 1.3 billion Chinese over the next 50 years of their lives. So let's get real in Minnesota. Let's face up to the reality that less money for education is not educational reform. It is not. It is not. And I'm proud that I kept the promise that I made here, and I will be done soon so you can have lunch, I promise. I promised a year ago all over the state that I would increase funding for K-12 education every year I'm governor. No excuses, no exceptions. And even with a $5 billion deficit, no excuses, no exceptions. And I've increased funding in my budget proposal for K-12 education. I wish I could do more, and I will do more. And to do so, I asked the wealthiest people in this state, those most successful, if they would pay more in income taxes, that we would reduce some of the regressivity, some of the unfairness. And the most recent study just came out this last week from the Department of Revenue corroborates that. It shows the wealthiest 1% and 5% of people in Minnesota pay a smaller percentage, about 83% of their income in state and local taxes as middle income taxpayers. Now, I don't fault them for paying what policymakers tell them they have to pay. I fault the policymakers for telling them they don't have to pay what you have to pay, or what other hardworking Minnesotans have to pay. And that needs to change, and that will change if I'm governor successful in this next legislative session. And I don't raise taxes, for the joy of raising taxes on anybody. I'd make taxes balanced and fairer, but I'd be delighted to cut everybody's taxes. And if our economy improves, we'll be able to do so. But in the meantime, the reality is with a $5 billion deficit, which is terrible enough, for every dollar of revenue you don't raise, you have to cut a dollar of spending. And now they're finding out, those who said, oh, we'll just live within our means and it'll be easy and we'll be home by Valentine's Day, just how tough that is. because every one of those dollars is about somebody's life. Our budget is about our values and our priorities as much as it is about dollars and cents. We could balance the state budget mathematically in a very easy, straightforward way. We just provide public school 3 days a week. Provide school 2 days a week, give everybody a tax cut. Now, obviously, that's absurd. And obviously, that would be dead wrong. And so is taking away personal care attendance from people with disabilities. And so is, denying people a nursing home when they need it. And so is not being able to provide home health care so that somebody has to go to a nursing home, which is going to be more expensive for all of us for the rest of their lives. And because also we're Minnesotans and we're better than that. And this is about our values and our priorities. Every dollar they cut is about somebody's life, their job, their income, their support, their education, their protection by police and fire. And that's why going through that budget, having to make the budget proposal I did, even with the revenues I raised, was the most painful thing I've done in my entire public service life. And I, watched with astonishment smiles on some of the faces of those who are making far more draconian, barbaric cuts than I made, and they're gleeful about it. I don't find anything gleeful about taking away somebody's job who wants to work. I don't find anything gleeful about telling someone your salary is going to be frozen, your health care benefits are going to go up, your pension is going to be eliminated. I don't find anything gleeful about telling somebody your class size is going to go from 27 this year to 32 next year. I don't find anything gleeful about causing pain to people's lives. So that's why, as President Dewar said, and I'll finish with this, we need your engagement now more than ever before. We need you engaged in the public process. There's not another election for 2 years, so this is about trying to prevent the worst from happening. We need to educate the people of Minnesota what's at stake here. We need to educate people that what might sound good on the surface is drastic and counterproductive and will have just the opposite effect on the quality of education, the best possible education that all of us want to provide for every child and every student throughout Minnesota. We need to educate legislators, and that's why we have more time in the process. And that's why they need to hear from you, because hearing from me, frankly, doesn't matter a whole lot to a lot of them. But hearing from you constituents and hearing from your family and your friends and your neighbors and your parents, let's hope that matters. It should matter. So I encourage and urge all of you, respectfully, responsibly, even respectfully to those we disagree with there, because we're not Wisconsin. We're better than that. And we need a better result than that. We'll get a better result than that if we work together and pull together and stand up for the students of Minnesota, stand up for the children of Minnesota, stand up for the parents of Minnesota, stand up for the teachers of Minnesota, stand up for the futures of Minnesota. Who's going to stand up for Minnesota? Who's going to stand up for Minnesota? Who's going to stand up for Minnesota? Thank you very much.